Hello, hello. My name is Jess, and this is Patient POV. And today we're hearing from Dorian, and he is a functional health practitioner specifically trained in nutrition. And he is absolutely a wealth of knowledge, and I'm so excited for you to get to hear from him. It is a very educational episode, shall we say, and it is absolutely amazing. Some of the things that he was able to explain for us. And so I'm going to let you jump in to that in just a second. I'm going to do really quickly housekeeping things and then just jump in because it's a little bit longer than normal. But he had so much to talk about. I feel like we could do like a five-part series and he'd still have so much information to share with us. And so fingers crossed, we'll be able to bring him on to another episode to talk about everything else more or other things. Such there were some things that I was like, I wish we had more time to dive into a few other things. And so fingers crossed we'll be able to get him, convince him to come back on the podcast. If you think of anything else that you come out of this episode and you go, ooh, I hope this could get explained even more. I'd love to hear more about this. Please feel free to send me a DM or write. I'll make that as the question for this episode. So feel free to put it in the comments or answer the question on if you're listening on Spotify. And yeah, I look forward to hearing from everyone. And speaking of housekeeping things, you can DM me at Jess underscore and underscore Elda, which is ELDA, which is if you're watching on the video, this dog sitting or sleeping right here. I'm sitting on the floor in my bedroom because it is Mother's Day. And so happy Mother's Day. Goodness, it's the evening of Mother's Day, shall I say. I've been baking and prepping all day. And so we had a very nice celebration with my mom. So happy Mother's Day to everyone who is a mother. And that is the housekeeping. Oh, almost forgot. Please feel free to subscribe and like and comment on this podcast. You can also head over to patientpov.ca and you'll be able to see more information about podcast episodes. You'll be able to see the blog, and there's some freebies in there if you subscribe to the newsletters. And the last thing I was going to say is if you use code Jess underscore and underscore Elda, which is ELDA, the same as my Instagram, at some days, you get 15% off. That is an amazing company as well. And they provide period relief products. But I also have been using their period cramp cream for like muscle relaxant, like any other muscle pains. And it's been working like an absolute charm. So head on over there and get 15% off. Yeah. And yeah, like I mentioned before, I am exhausted, so I might be rambling a little bit right now. So we're just going to jump right into this podcast episode. And thank you guys all so much for your support. And I hope you have a great week ahead. Hello, hello. How are you today?
I'm very good, thank you. How you doing?
Good, thank you. So do you want to just jump right in and give us an introduction on who you are and kind of your health journey background and what you're doing now and the whole
Yeah,
shebang?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my name's Dorian. I'm living here in the UK, and I'm a functional medicine practitioner. I'm trained as a nutritionist. I got my training here, and it's functional medicine principles is what I've been trained on. I got into it. I wasn't always. I was, I believe it or not, a ship broker for like 15 years, which is like real estate for ships, like oil tankers and stuff like that. Your clients buy or sell ships and you take the commission. So it's literally like real estate. And in my early 30s, I started to notice some health issues. I kind of ignored those and those became quite significant. to the point where I was pretty debilitated. I used to spend days in bed, like because I was so fatigued. Um, and a real low point was, I wasn't able to. I had two sons at that time. I have three kids now, and I had two sons at that point. I wasn't able to pick up. I was so weak, I couldn't pick up my kids. I could barely get up the stairs. This culminated in a diagnosis of the autoimmune condition Graves' disease,
Mm,
which for people who don't know is autoimmune hyperthyroid. So you have too much thyroid hormone. Um, so I lost a lot of weight and everything, and that wasn't good. I was super, super anxious. I had horrific insomnia, which was easily the worst part of the condition.
mm,
That was, that would drive anyone insane. And I really, really believed in conventional medicine at that time. So, I did everything I should have done. I had an endocrinologist. I did everything they said, and nothing really um, helped me. I was still in the same position. Actually, my blood test normalized, but my thyroid blood test normalized, but the way I felt didn't.
mm,
So that is, it wasn't, this was like, it took me a while actually. It was like 3 years of this, and I wasn't really very good at my job, because I was spending so much time at home and debilitated. And it wasn't till my endocrinologist was like, right, we're going to take your thyroid out, that I thought that was like a bit of a wake up call for me, because that just didn't, everything up until then I just done, and it didn't make any sense to me that you would just take out a body part and that was going to be better. So I started looking at other options, and I discovered functional medicine, and I saw a practitioner, and then the stuff we started to do, I started to feel better. And then I was on like a 2 year journey to feeling a lot better, to the point where I felt like, I was 31, 32 when this all started. And I thought, oh, I'm getting old. I'm 42 now. And I think 31 is so young. I can't believe I thought I was getting old at 31. And I mean, so that inspired me. I got more into health than I was in my real job. I wasn't a very good shipbroker at that time. So I decided I'm going to make this. I can't believe that no one else knows about this. It's crazy that there's so many people. And I knew people also who have kinds of autoimmunity around my age, and that it was really impacting on their lives and quality of life. So I trained, and now I'm practicing. So I started practicing in about 2017.
Amazing. Yeah. And so you've been practicing for about, well, I was trying to do the math there, like
So 7 years,
7 years. Yeah.
6.5, 7 years now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. And so what was the educational requirements for you to be in the position that you're in now?
Yeah, good question. I had to, I mean, I have a master's, so I
Mm,
have a master's in nutritional therapy, and then I also have a diploma. So the diploma is what allows me to practice. That's sort of where you get trained. I think we sort of covered the functional medicine model in both, but the master's was much more theoretical, whereas the diploma was much more practical. And I think you could be a health coach without. So it was a 3 year process. I think you can be a health coach without that stuff. The only thing that, I literally asked, I said to my practitioner, what do I have to do? And he said, this is what I did. And I'm pretty good at taking advice. So I just did that. So I didn't look at any other options, but I know there are loads of other ways you can become a health coach that might be lighter touch, or you could do more stuff, if academic stuff, if you wanted to as well.
Very cool. Yeah, yeah. I always like to see the context in terms of like you have the lived experience, so you can
Yeah.
relate to people that way as well, but you also have some educational foundation, which is really awesome. And so
Yeah.
you currently work with some clients, and what clients do you work with?
Yeah. So my clients are, I would say my clients are all histamine related. So mast cell activation syndrome, histamine intolerance, long COVID is a big one recently, obviously, right?
Mhm.
Which long COVID tends to fall into post-viral fatigue syndrome or histamine issues or POTS or all of them, right? Can be all of them. Um, Autoimmunity, so lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, thyroid autoimmunity, probably not surprising. I get a lot of Graves' disease clients. It's way rarer than Hashimoto's, but I probably have equal Hashimoto's to Graves' disease clients, right? And then gut issues, so gastritis. I get a lot of gastritis clients.
Mm.
Uh, IBS, colitis, which is autoimmune spectrum type thing. Um, diverticulitis, all that sort of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. And so do you work with only clients in the UK, or do you have clients across the world, really?
Oh, international. So I have New Zealand, Australia. I've had Asian clients, European clients, UK clients, America, and Canada. So this was only like since COVID, right? I was a face-to-face practitioner, and obviously my business was in big trouble as a face-to-face practitioner come to 2020. So I had to kind of reinvent myself online, and it's been actually the best thing I ever could have done because my reach is much wider now on social media. I have clients from most time zones. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. And so, when you are working with a client, what types of things do you cover?
you mean in terms of what the sort of things I'm looking for?
Um, sure, we can go in that direction. Or like when you're saying like nutritionist, what about food are you, or is it
Oh,
food that you're talking about or
okay. So
yeah.
like the solutions. Yeah, great question. So yeah, nutrition is obviously a big part of it, right? I do find most of the people who come to me have already done quite a substantial amount with nutrition.
Mm,
They've researched online, so it's rare that I get someone's diet because I'll do a 3-day diet when they come to me and I say this is a low quality diet. It happens, but it's rare. Most people are quite educated. They've worked out foods that are problematic. So when it comes to that, it's more like tweaks. Like one thing that's really big is undereating that I have. And that's a really major thing when it comes to chronic illnesses because like redu reduced metabolic rate is like a chronic stress survival mechanism.
mhm,
And we want to kind of correct that, and symptoms will usually correct with that. So we don't want to undereat. People get a lot of food fear, sometimes unnecessarily, around foods that they've heard are bad or they think about, and maybe it isn't even bad for them. Looking at specific macronutrients, people always undereat protein, almost always undereat
mm,
protein, and that's huge. That is absolute. I can't emphasize enough how important that is. And then mineral stuff, so your electrolytes, right? Electrolyte balance if you're in that chronic stress state, you're depleting electrolytes. So that's something that definitely we want to look at in terms of your nutrition and maybe supplementing salt and stuff like that. That can be, I mean, pots, that can be a game changer, right? If you do
mm.
that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so I would do that with nutrition. And then I'm not just limited to that. So I do sleep. So I actually have a sleep therapy qualification. So because it's such an important thing in line with the chronic illness. So I do have people who come to me with insomnia. That's usually part of their secondary to their condition. So we're looking at sleep. Like there's no medication that can beat the power of good sleep if we can fix your sleep and sleep quality more than quantity. Stress management. So I'm NLP trained as well, so neuro linguistic programming. But I've picked up stuff from that and other things that I like. You know, I like mindfulness. I like some NLP techniques. We're thinking about how you can reframe ways that the relationship you have with your own brain and your thoughts, right? Can we sort of chip away at some automatic neurological connections you have over some stress response triggers, right? And then finally is I do movement, so exercise as well. I will do as well. Now, I do have a personal training background, although it was a long time ago. I was 19 and I probably wasn't a very good personal trainer. But I use movement from a perspective of someone who's working with people who get PEM, right? So post exercise malaise. We don't want that, right? But we do want to try and get you stronger, right? If we can get you physically stronger, there are so many mechanisms, and we can talk about some of them if you wanted to,
Of
as
course,
to,
yeah.
yeah, there's so many mechanisms as to why that is going to make you healthier and feel better and make your quality of life better, right? So I work with all those. Those are the primary things that I'm talking to my clients about.
That's amazing. Yeah. So when I initially came to see if you would be willing to come on the podcast, it was because on episode 14, I think it was, of this podcast, we had somebody who was mentioning that they had IBD and that they really did some research into foods, and they started working with a nutritionist and was able to fix some of their numbers, like their blood results, because of the food that they ate. And so I was like, it would be great to have somebody come on and explain a little bit more in depth on the science behind things. But you don't just do food, you really look at the person as a whole and work on
Yeah.
many different facets, which is absolutely amazing.
Right.
So going back to you were saying exercise malaise or post exertion malaise, sorry. How come you should exercise even though you get tired after? Like, how does that all
Yeah,
work?
so
What's the
so first, let's caveat. You shouldn't, right? You should if you get PEM, you've done too much. Okay. So if you're listening to this and saying, I can't do much without doing PEM, you're still doing too much. Okay.
Mm,
Everyone can exercise. It just depends on how low your bar is.
mm,
Okay. You want to think about like things that get you into chronic illness is you've adapted negatively. Most of the processes that get you into chronic illnesses are not things that shouldn't happen. They are emergency survival responses, basically. So you have an allopathic load, which is basically the stresses you're facing, which can be things like, your life stress, physical stress, infections, things
mm,
like that or environmental toxins, for example. These are stress. Your body doesn't have unlimited resources to deal with this, right? And if these things get too much over time, this is where systems start to break down and you hit the emergency button, right? So, for example, I'll use an example like autoimmunity comes about this way. Histamine issues come. Mast cell activation is so tied to your nervous system perception of your environment. It's a great example. What usually happens, um, what usually happens is over time. So you make cortisol in response to stress, right? Cortisol is your master controller of your immune system. As your cortisol goes up, your immune system goes up. Okay.
mm,
Now you only have a limited capacity to make cortisol, and if cortisol is topped out over time, what happens is your cells start to protect themselves from the signal of cortisol. Right? They can't constantly be being told the same message from cortisol. All cells have this ability to protect themselves from the signal of hormone, and they do this by reducing their receptors to that hormone. Right? It's called resistance, so insulin resistance, something people have heard of. That's how that works. Cortisol resistance works similarly. We can get resistance to all kinds of hormones if they are inappropriately elevated over long periods of time. When you get cortisol resistance, if we anthropomorphize the body, right, if we sort of think about it as an intelligent being, that it doesn't like the fact that it now doesn't have direct access to its immune system, your immune system, right? It doesn't like that fact because that's what cortisol is, right? It wants to be on top, controlling your immune cells like puppets. It now can't do that. Now, why that's such a big problem to the body is because if we look at our evolutionary past, the two major stresses that we're evolved to face is famine and infectious disease. Okay, they killed the most of our ancestors. So when your body doesn't have access to those immune cells, it thinks this is really bad. We might die. Let's hit the emergency response button, which is histamine, right? And now you are super sensitive to everything in histamine, and your body doesn't care that you're tired, you have brain fog and all these outbreaks, whatever. It doesn't care because it thinks the downside is death,
mm,
right? So it's obviously not good, but it is actually an emergency response survival. It's an emergency survival response to the inputs you've given it. So there's a very long-winded way to say you've adapted yourself into a negative place. We want to do the opposite. We want to use your innate ability to adapt, right? Because everyone can adapt until you literally die. You're an adaptation machine. We want to use that innate ability to adapt to move you in a positive direction, right? And when we think about one of the best ways we can send a signal to get your body to adapt, it is to get stronger, to
mm,
make you physically stronger, right? There are certain hoops your body has to jump through to get stronger. You have to take away from so your cortisol is made from the same precursor molecules as your sex hormones and your anabolic hormones like testosterone, which women have as men as men, right? If we get stronger, we have to take away. If you go from 2 reps to 5 reps, we don't have a choice. We have to take away from that stress hormone side or the anabolic hormone side. We have to make more mitochondria in your cells, right? Which is opposite to the process of what happens when you go into chronic illness. You reduce your mitochondrial density. Increased
mm,
mitochondrial density means less reactive oxygen species, right? Less oxidative stress. You deal with oxidative stress better. Um, your muscle, so your muscle secretes something called myokines. Myokines are cytokines, which are signaling molecules, and they balance the immune system. So they're anti-cancer. They're also anti-autoimmune conditions. So if your immune system is too ramped up, it tells it to calm down. If your immune system is too low, like in cancer, it tells it to ramp up. So there are a host of ways, basically, that getting stronger can we can um, by adapting you to get stronger, we can improve. And I think your original question was, why should you exercise if you get PEM? Is that right?
Yeah, or like yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So to that, so I just talked about why it's so important. Okay, so that's so I try and sell people listening on why it's so important. Right now, you know how it's so important. You got to do it properly, right? Like if you get a crash, you are doing too much, right? We need
Mm,
to start from a lower base. But the great thing is, right, in terms of bang for buck, strength training or resistance training, you can get amazing benefits from unbelievably low amounts. I had clients who start and they're doing like a lunge a day. That was it. That was their exercise. One lunge a day, right? The next week they do two lunges a day. Isn't very much. But as the weeks go by, eventually like they'll be doing 10 or 20 lunges a day. Right now they're in a different now they've actually pushed their bar for PEM further away. Right
mm.
now they have more stamina in life, right? Their quality of life has increased. Everything that's had to happen to get them there, right, is beneficial. Right now we can even think about adding some weight, maybe starting back at a lower rep. So um, uh, you should exercise, but you need to personalize to you the amount and the activities you're doing to something that you can do without a crash.
And in your job, that's what you do is you help work with clients
Absolutely, yeah.
and figure that out.
Like I've worked with 20-year-old athletes, and I've worked with 90-year-olds who have autoimmunity and who can barely move, like people who have MS and stuff. What they're doing is two different worlds, right? This isn't necessarily you're going to the gym and you're trying to bodybuild. That's not what it looks like,
Right.
right? We
Yeah.
start at the most difficult thing for most people is the psychological aspect of this, because most people who do this, they will have been to the gym and they'll have been able to do way more in the past. And so there's a patience element,
No,
right?
for sure. And that's, I guess, where you tie in as well with your the psychological aspect of it as well. So you're really a full patient as a whole, not just a single
Right,
part of them. That's
right.
amazing. Yeah. And then I also saw a video actually you posted recently about resistance like strength training versus cardio training
Yeah,
and what one did you say
yeah.
was better and why?
Yeah, I said strength training. Yeah, yeah. So that one was for specifically probably for histamine issues itself. So
Mm,
nothing wrong with cardio, right? The problem is like so if you think about the variables that we have to manipulate when it comes to your exercise or your activity, there is frequency, which is how much you go. There is volume, which is how much overall, and there is intensity, okay, which is how hard it is, right? Now, with the one that we need to be most careful about with people who have chronic illnesses is volume, sorry, free intensity and then volume. Okay,
mm,
so how much we can do too much, and definitely we can do too hard. I find that people with, chronic conditions, they are very sensitive to intensity. Okay, so
mm,
the absolute worst thing we can do is a hit workout extremely high intensity. Okay. Now, cardio, believe it or not, is very easy to overdo the intensity, right? Even like what you think is a long, steady state cardio, like a jog, all you're actually doing, if we looked at your hormones, you're just jacking up your cortisol and you're keeping them there for the duration of the exercise, right? Which is really not what we want to do. That's not a helpful it's not creating, you're not creating any helpful adaptations when it comes to chronic illness. With strength training, like I said, because it is so scalable. We can go all the way down to one lunge or even like a semi lunge for someone who can't do that, right? And we can build it up to, the 20-year-old athlete program and everything in between, right? And we can also, that intensity, we can scale that intensity. So, we don't have to go for a run. We can start with the, set of lunges or whatever it is. So, it's the intensity thing. Like you can work hard at resistance training, but it's not very intense because you are only working for 10 seconds,
mm.
right? You were only
Yeah.
actually working for 20. So what you did was hard, but it was only 10 seconds. So you can see there's an economies of like there's this economies of scale difference between the two kinds of exercise. And then the adaptations we get from cardio are not beneficial for chronic illness in the way that the adaptations for strength training are, right? Which is all the stuff that I just talked to you about.
Right. Yeah, for sure. That's amazing. Yeah. And then just flipping the switch a little bit and going more towards the nutrition side of things. One thing that is very popular, I'd like to say right now, is talking about like the gut microbiome and like improving it. Can you explain what that is and like how it gets depleted and how we
Yeah.
can improve it?
Awesome question. So the gut microbiome is just either you have a population, you have a colony, of bacteria that live in your gut. Okay. They are, in terms of how they relate in chronic illness, they are essentially signaling molecules. They are signaling molecules to your immune system. And I'll explain what you mean by that. So your gut microbiome in general is controlled by a number of variables. The biggest variable of all that controls your gut microbiome is your own gut function. Okay, how your gut works. So your gut is your mouth, your anus, right, and everything in between. And there are certain mechanisms to mean that the environment that we create, right? So if the gut is functioning well, the environment we create will encourage the growth of the things that we want there, limit the growth of the things that we don't want there. Okay, so we have, populations of bacteria. We want diversity. We want the right amount. We don't want too much. We don't want too little diversity. And your gut function is really good at doing this because one of the main environmental signals to what grows there is your pH. You have an acidity level in each part of your gut, right? And the pH will determine what bacteria flourishes in that environment.
Mm.
Okay. So your gut function is your stomach acid production. Okay. It's your bile secretion. It's your pancreatic enzyme secretion. And it's your peristalsis, which is the contractions of your gut. If you look at the gut, it's like looks like fingers, villi under the microscope. It sweeps everything down into your colon. All of this working perfectly, and your gut microbiome should stay as it is. Even if we put a parasite in there, right? If we put a pathogen in there, right, you might have a food poisoning event, right? You might get sick, but your gut has the ability to then get that back under control and go back to what is healthy. Okay. Now, that's the biggest influence. Obviously, what you eat influences what's in your microbiome, right? Certain foods will do certain things. We will feed certain bacteria. We know that fiber will feed bacteria, certain bacteria. Sugar is going to feed certain bacteria, right? That is all relevant. But what we're finding about, so this is a fledgling silent science. We don't fully understand it. Anyone who says they do is not correct because we do not fully understand the influence at all. We know now that almost everything affects the change in your microbiome. So how you sleep affects your microbiome. It's not just
Mm.
what you eat. If you exercise, that changes your microbiome. If you go and walk in nature, this changes your microbiome. So absolutely everything you do changes your microbiome. And the reality is there is probably a bidirectional relationship between your overall health and your microbiome, right? Isn't one thing is more important than the other? There is this bidirectional relationship, probably. So why it's so important? Okay, so let's talk in the context of sort of some of the conditions we've been talking about.
Mhm.
70 to 80% of your immune system resides outside your gut. So that means immune system isn't an organ, it's cells, right? And there's a reason for this. The gut is actually, if you think about your gut, it's not actually part of your body. It's a bit weird to say. It's not like an organ like your liver or your heart, which are part of your body. It's more like a tunnel going through a mountain, right?
Right.
And actually, yeah, it's like that because you want to keep the stuff in your gut separate from your body. Okay.
Mm.
In the same way that you have skin. So skin is a defensive barrier, right? We can put soil, we can have pathogens on our skin. Nothing's going to happen unless you've got a cut, right? Nothing's going to happen because our skin is there. It's a barrier. However, the gut, we don't have skin in our gut. We have to have this hyperpermeable layer so we can extract the nutrients from the food, but at the same time, we don't want that stuff getting into our blood. We don't want any bacteria getting into our blood, right? That means sepsis, right?
Right.
And in the environment we evolved in, we're sterile, right? We're eating plenty of bacteria. We don't want it, something gets through your gut lining into your blood, you're going to die. So because of this, we've evolved to have most of our immune cells, 70 to 80% of our immune cells sit outside our gut and they look into our gut, what's going on in our gut. And they're kind of paranoid, right? They're kind of paranoid because again, on that risk benefit analysis, right? It's like a paranoid. There's these cells called dendritic cells, and they look like a starfish, and they are part of the immune system. They don't kill anything, but they're identification cells. They look like a starfish because they're designed with these arms to touch other cells. So they touch, that's a self cell, that's a problematic cell, that's a neutral cell. They're constantly identifying things. And these dendritic cells actually they sit on the epithelial cell layer. It's one cell thick, and they actually stick an arm through into the gut, literally sensing what's in the gut, right?
Mm.
So part of that immune system's job is to modulate. You make immunoglobulins that modulates your gut bacteria, right? That's part of this first defense mechanism that keeps your gut bacteria in check, that you want it to work properly. Now, if you go into a situation that I described with stress and your immune system is now on hyper alert, right?
Mhm.
And let's paint a fairly typical picture. Your immune system's on hyper alert, and because your nervous system is in this stress sympathetic state, right? Your gut function is terrible, right? Your parasympathetic isn't working. You're getting this buildup of bacteria because it's not being cleared through. Your peristalsis isn't working. And maybe you have some monocultures as well. Some you find in those environments, some bacteria will thrive more than other. Anaerobes, so which is like Bacteroides species or Candida, funguses. Anaerobes are things that respire anaerobically, right? They tend to thrive in poor gut function environments. You get this overgrowth. Your immune system is seeing all these bacteria, right? It's like seeing, oh my God, there's so many. Again, we anthropomorphize it. We're seeing there's so many of them, right? Now, again, you're now creating hyperstimulation in your immune system from your gut. Now, your immune system looking at your gut is going to start reacting to all kinds of things. So you put foods in there, and it's just saying that's a problem, that's a problem, that's a problem. It's identifying everything as problematic. So that's how you can get food intolerances, right? I also just sort of described how issues in your gut or overgrowths in your gut can contribute to immune stimulation, which can contribute to immune issues like mast cell, histamine issues, autoimmunity. Does that
Amazing. Yeah. That made a lot of sense. And I really like how when you're explaining something, you're giving very like visually I can visualize what you're talking
right?
about. So that's amazing. Yeah, for sure.
Right.
And so what is something that people can do to help improve their gut microbiome, considering it's so important?
Great question. So I think that the best things you can do is you want to work on things that put your gut function back. You want to normalize your gut function, okay? Because if you're watching this, you have gut issues, or you think there's something going with your gut that's contributing to your immune system. If I click my fingers and I normalize your gut, your problem will go away, probably within days, literally within days. So, but obviously we can't do that. There's no silver bullets. So we want to focus on intervention. So what gets your gut working? So number one is your nervous system. Okay, you have nerves coming out of your brain that go to all tissues in your body. They tell it to work. Has also have your autonomic nervous system, which is the stuff that controls the stuff that you don't. Right, pupil dilation, blood pressure, heart rate. You're not controlling that. Happens. Digestion is the same. Your digestion is controlled by your parasympathetic nervous system, right? That's as we say, you'll relax and digest, right? If you're too sympathetically dominant, if you're in your sympathetic all the time, you're not getting any gut function. We want to improve your parasympathetic tone. So how do we improve your parasympathetic tone? So nutrient availability. So we're looking at your diet, right? Are you getting Are you signaling for abundance in your environment, right? With the nutrients that you're getting, right? We want to, weight is a great way because you have to become more parasympathetic to recover from weights, right? It's a prerequisite. It's one of those hoops you have to get through to get stronger. Obviously, nervous system stuff, mindfulness, gratitude, sleep is obviously a huge player here. Sleep is massive. So we want to make your parasympathetic more efficient. We can help it on its way, right? We might supplement with things like acid, right? Acid betaine-HCl is an awesome supplement with this stuff because one of the problems when you get stuck in this rut is now that you haven't got a gut function, you're not absorbing the nutrients you need, you're signaling for more stress, right? So you can get stuck in this loop. We can break that cycle by supplementing acid. Now you can break down your food properly and you can get more nutrients. And acid signals, if we have sufficient acid coming out of the stomach into the duodenum, that signals for the whole cascade of gut function, right? Acid in the duodenum is like a tripwire, like pancreatic enzymes secrete, the bile secretes. So we can try and artificially crank up your acid then, and you're going to break down nutrients you need. So, for example, you'll break down tryptophan, an amino acid, you'll break down your protein better, and tryptophan is what you make serotonin which is the currency of your parasympathetic nervous system. Now your gut function is going to be better, right? So those are the things you want to think about and that you want to sort of correct. Parasympathetic tone, and you can help it with some supplementation.
Amazing. Yeah. And so one thing we talk about a lot here is a lot of people have found that mindfulness or gratitude are things that just seem to work, or like journaling and things. And it feels very like soft science of like, oh yeah, like it's so nice, but
Yeah,
you're explaining it actually does have an impact and
yeah.
this is why. So that's
Yeah.
absolutely amazing.
I can share a quick story with you if you're up
Of
for it.
course. Yeah, of course.
So I used to think, so I was taught this, everything I've told you, and I used to think this was a subtle effect. So if you were in your sympathetic nervous system, you had a little bit less acid, a little bit less bile, a little bit less enzymes, and over time that made a difference. Okay. I actually found out that it's a really big acute effect, and I'll explain what I mean by that. I have a friend who has something called a Heidelberg machine. Okay. Have you heard of what a Heidelberg machine is?
I haven't, no.
A Heidelberg machine is what they used to use before they invented PPIs, which I think are awful drugs. But anyway, so PPIs, which block your acid. So it used to be recognized that things like acid reflux and gastritis were problems of low acid. What a Heidelberg machine is a capsule on a string that you swallow into your stomach, and it measures your pH in real time. Okay, so
Mm,
you can see what your stomach pH is. Okay, they then squirt bicarbonate of soda into your mouth, which neutralizes the acid, and you can measure how fast it takes for you to reacidify, so that you can give someone a diagnosis of low stomach acid. Okay, so I went and did a Heidelberg machine because my friend who works for a company has one, and because it's just a friend, I was kind of messing around. We were reacidifying. I was doing okay, and then I thought I'm going to see if I can change how fast I reacidify by how I breathe. So he did the bicarbonate. I breathed like this, like shallow breathing, like panic breathing, and I never reacidified. Never. I just
oh,
did. And then I said, okay, I a few times, right? And then I stopped breathing like that and I reacidify. And then I started to do, so I said, what about the opposite? So I did belly breathing, like breathing into my diaphragm, and I reacidified quicker than I was before every single time, which was wild to me. So that experience taught me that this is an acute thing. You can actually make a difference by things you do in and around your meal times.
that's
So I
so
like
amazing.
yeah, teach people about relaxing around meal times, a bit of mindfulness before you eat, maybe gratitude for what they've got the food there, and maybe even doing some breathing after the meal. But for me, that was wild because it showed me you have more control over this than you think.
Yeah, no, for sure. You have more control than you think, and you have immediate control
Yeah,
as well.
right,
That's
right,
so
right.
amazing. And so, where can people find you if they want to connect with you and start working with you as well? Because you are a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, so the best place, my Instagram is summit double underscore health. That's my main Instagram. And then on Facebook, I have a group and it's called Symptom Reversal Formula, which is the name of my program as well, but that's my group. So on Instagram, it's more like short reels and stuff and pictures, but really my Facebook group is where I'm giving, obviously I've got about 2,000, I've got over 2,000 members in my group and I probably have only worked with 2% of them or something like that. So my Facebook group is where I try and help everyone who's inevitably, not everyone's going to become my client. That's where I try and help as many people as possible. So it's like 10-minute videos and just the stuff in my group should give you a lot of information where you can help yourself.
That's amazing. Yeah. And so I will link both your Instagram and your Facebook group on the description, like the show notes description. But it's
Okay.
amazing that you're willing to like give information even if they're not working directly with you or whatnot. So I think that's absolutely amazing. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for joining me today. I do
Thanks
appreciate
for
all the
having me.
information. Of course.
Absolutely.